a large-scale strike against Venezuela and its leader, President Nicolas Maduro, who has been, along with his wife, captured and flown out of the country. This operation was done in conjunction with U.S. law enforcement. Details to follow. There will be a news conference today at 11 a.m. at Mar-a-Lago. Thank you for your attention. So everyone was talking whether this there's an amphibious attack going on and whether this is the beginning of a new war. What's your initial take? Other pieces of information that we have is that there's multiple locations that were targeted. The largest airbase, the headquarters, the defense headquarters, Ministry of Defense. We've got the various communication sites, anti-air defense systems, the Russian air defense systems that they have. And we've had, and the reason we knew there's an operation and special forces in the country is because Chinook helicopters, as well as AH-1Zs and MH-16 Black Hawks, were spotted over Caracas. And now we know that the objective of these helicopters was special forces capturing Maduro and flying him out of the country. What's your initial reaction, Alex?
Well, there were no air defenses, so there was no way for Venezuela, for the military to prevent the capture of Maduro. And if I had to take a guess, I would say that this was very much along the lines of what happened in Syria. Bribes were given out, people were paid off, the air defenses were not activated. The U.S. military struck Caracas, struck Venezuela, hit whatever military bases they needed to hit, perhaps to take out whatever military forces were not on the take, were not bribed. The ones that they were didn't fire any air defense, and they grabbed Maduro. I think it's that simple. I think it's a huge, if this is indeed true, then I think this is a big win for Trump. It's terrible for Venezuela, terrible for the world, because you just can't go into a country and take the leader, right? Regime change is what we've seen going on. That's what's happened. It wasn't a decapitation strike this time around. They just captured Maduro. They captured his wife as well, and there's going to be a new government installed. I guess that would be the next step, right? But what do you have next? What comes afterwards? Are we going to have some sort of an insurgency? Are we going to have chaos and instability in Venezuela? I mean, I think that's the big question. If this is indeed true, and I don't see why not. Trump says he's going to announce everything in a press conference. So I imagine they have captured Maduro. We just can't go into a country and capture the leader. But it does look like, very much in the same way that they executed the regime change in Syria, they've done the same thing in Venezuela.
And do you say that because of the limited defenses that were put up by Venezuela and the army?
None. No air defense.
Not one
even limited
at all.
Yeah, so for me, that's very, very suspicious. And I imagine that whatever military was loyal to Maduro, that was targeted or kept distracted, occupied with the Apache helicopter strikes. So they hit whatever air bases they needed to hit, whatever military facilities they needed to hit. They struck at those. Air defenses were not activated, and they went in and grabbed Maduro. That's the way it looks.
So Maduro, after the attacks, as I was preparing for our interview, and I was just coming up with the agenda, and one of the things I put up is the response by Venezuela. And Maduro essentially called for declared national emergency and called for the troops to be deployed. But as I was typing this out, he was already captured. It was a very, very quick operation. Yeah. What does that say about U.S. military capabilities? And then who leads the military now? And there were reports that the defense minister was killed. That was not confirmed. It doesn't seem so. A lot of people were speculating a capitulation strike where they target the leadership, as Israel did in Iran. That hasn't happened. It's more of a shock and awe. They destroyed their capabilities. What does that say about the U.S. The U.S. capabilities? But also, what can Venezuela do next? Who controls Venezuela in the meantime?
I don't know who controls Venezuela in the meantime. I think that's a good question. I imagine the U.S. controls Venezuela, right? I mean, that's the way it looks. What does it say about the U.S. military capabilities? The military capabilities? Nothing, really. It doesn't tell me anything about the U.S. military capabilities. It tells me that the U.S. has excellent covert intel capabilities. It tells me that the U.S. did infiltrate the Venezuelan military, probably going months, if not years back. and they've been working on military officials, and they got to them. That's what this tells me. This tells me that the CIA and the intel officials, which we do know from various New York Times articles going back a month or two ago, that the CIA was operating in Venezuela.
Trump declared it openly.
Yeah, and then he declared it openly. So for Trump to declare it openly, we have to assume this has been happening for a long time, that the CIA has been operating in Venezuela and working on turning military officials. And it looks like they've done it. It looks like they succeeded in doing that. As far as a U.S. military, if you have no air defense, and if a certain percentage of the military officials have been paid off or bribed or whatever the scenario is, we'll find out from Trump when he gives the press conference. Then there's really not much you can say about the actual military operation. That this was a covert operation, a kidnapping of an internationally recognized leader of a country. Now you have a power vacuum, which the U.S. is going to fill. I don't know who's going to come in.
Maria Machado, probably.
Machado, yeah. who Venezuelans despise. Is it going to be Juan Guaido, who Venezuelans despise, or is it going to be someone else? This is the problem now. U.S. regime change operations never turn out well. Never. And we see that unfolding in Syria. The same thing happened in Syria. Pretty much the same exact thing. Military officials were paid off. Assad was left isolated. Instead of the U.S. capturing Assad, perhaps because of Russia's closeness to Syria, perhaps because of the geography, Syria being close to Russia as well, they managed to extract Assad. In this instance, Venezuela is very, very far away. So
can you actually break down Syria? It's a fascinating story, because when I spoke to people that were close to the Assad regime, they said while they were trying to find out what's going on, a lot of troops were putting their weapons down. Commanders were ordering the troops to put their weapons down and withdraw, or allow the opposition forces to enter unopposed. And they said that a lot of them were paid off, and they were finding this out over time. And also AI was used to trick a lot of them, to give them fake orders to not resist the forces that were advancing. Can you break that down a bit further? Because I know you've covered it on your channel, and how that comparison would apply to what we're seeing now in Venezuela. So do you think that the US has planned to pay off a lot of these leaders over the last few months as they're preparing this operation? So when the day comes when they press the green button to kick it off, a lot of these leaders would stand down. The air defense system, as you said, would all stand down.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much explained it. You choke the economies of these countries, whether it's Syria or whether it's Venezuela. The military officials are not getting paid what they think they should be getting paid. The U.S. comes along and pays them more, and there you go. And that's what happened in Syria. Assad made many mistakes. We have to say this. Russia told Assad many times for example, to reconcile with Erdogan and with Turkey, even though Turkey led what was one of the leading countries in the conflict in Syria. Russia told Assad, look, you have to meet with Erdogan and you have to reconcile with Turkey. That's very important. Assad refused. Assad refused to go to the BRICS summit in Kazan, even though Russia told him, come to the BRICS summit. Yes, you're not a member of BRICS, but attend. It's important for you to go to that summit. Assad, the big mistake that he made were two. He refused Russia's consultations and Russia's mediation, especially with Erdogan and with Turkey. And the other big mistake that he made, which was a huge mistake, my understanding of this, is that he got rid of a lot of the very loyal, hardcore, battle-proven military officials that he had in place during the conflict that was going on in Syria, and he replaced them with other officials who were more loyal or more friendly to the Arab Gulf nations, because he wanted to align himself more with the Arab Gulf nations. And those officials were not loyal to his father. They were not as loyal to himself, and they were easy to turn. And that's what happened. There was no victory in some sort of a civil war or anything like that happened in Syria. Basically, it was ISIS, Al Qaeda, Al Nusra, call them what you want, that the U.S. brought in to basically walk into Damascus
Are
once
you
they
at
turned
least,
military.
when all this started, I was speaking to someone, I told him, obviously I was very critical of US intervention. I've always been critical of regime change. But when I saw the news by Trump, would you consider this? I know it's too early to say success, because what matters is what happens next. It's always the day after that really counts. Will the country go into what Syria and Libya went into, or will they prosper as Venezuela economically has been suffering for a long time? Time will tell. But are you at least impressed, or do you see that to be a partial success? It is a win for Trump optically in the US, but from a military perspective, a successful operation when you have no troops, no troop casualties whatsoever on the US side. Maduro captured within hours. We're still preparing for this interview before we got the news that he was captured, a couple of hours after the operation started. Would that be a successful military operation as a whole? And then let's go to the day after. What will be your prediction next? Where do you see Venezuela in a month from now? Because Venezuela's economically, because we have to also accept that Maduro is also not popular. It's hard to confirm. Is Machado popular? Is she not? Is Maduro popular? But we know Maduro is not popular. Assad was not popular when Syria fell. And Maduro was in a similar position. He had a lot of support within the military, which you said that was one of the areas targeted by the US through through people being paid off.
I would say that Machado is definitely not popular. I think everyone can accept that Machado is not popular in Venezuela. Maduro, I would say it's a mixed bag. I don't think he's not popular. I think there is a large part of the population that, and maybe not even so much Maduro as Chavez and the institutions that Chavez ushered in, and Maduro being the successor of that government. Is he unpopular with certain parts of the Venezuelan, especially, let's say, the Caracas population or the elite society? Sure. The same held for Assad. Assad was popular, but he also had parts of Syria that he was unpopular with. Bringing in Machado is not the solution. Bringing in a Guaido character is not the solution, because these people are universally throughout Venezuela unpopular. So, I mean, they're not going to be the solution. What they're going to do is they're going to sell the resources of Venezuela to the West, to the United States. Machado has already said that. So is this a success from a covert intel perspective? Yeah, huge success short term for Trump, and Trump is going to milk it. He's going to play it up. We went into Venezuela.
He already just said now in a brief phone interview with the Times, just came in now as you're speaking, Trump celebrated the success of the mission to capture Maduro. Quote, a lot of good planning, a lot of great troops and great people. It was a brilliant operation, actually. As he took a lot of credit for the Iranian strikes on the nuclear facilities, which one can make a better argument that those were a failure in comparison to what we're seeing now in Venezuela. But yeah, he's taking a lot of credit for this. I think this one's a much better story for him, because he was everyone was looking at Trump, Iran, same thing. They're like, Trump, you want to be the peace president. You want to end wars, not start wars. So people were immediately quick in jumping on criticizing him when he struck Iran. But that strike marked the end of the war in Iran. So that didn't hurt him politically. And now in Venezuela, everyone was watching on whether the US will be dragged into another war. Well, it hasn't. It was a 2-hour strike. Maduro's out. And what happens next, time will tell. But I think Americans care less, unfortunately. Americans would care less about what happens to Venezuela next. They don't care much about where Libya's at today. They care more about whether US troops are still in Venezuela. US troops are being targeted in Venezuela. And that is not the case. So from a political perspective, this is a win. No troop casualties. Whether Venezuela prospers economically, hopefully it does, or the economy collapses even further and maybe leads to civil war, I think Americans care less about that. Until it leads to immigrants flowing into the country. That's a different story.
Well, yeah, that's a different story. Exactly. So, I mean, short term, this is a big win for Trump. He's going to take advantage of this. He's going to take his victory lap, and they got their regime change.
Where are Russia and China? Where are Russia and China?
Well, they can't really do anything, can they? Actually, China was in Venezuela just yesterday. There were Chinese officials in Venezuela just yesterday. But I mean, Russia can't do anything and China can't do anything. I mean, they're so far away from Venezuela. There's really not much that they could do. And the minute you've got the top military officials, the way it looks, you have the top military officials already bribed and turning against the government. There's really nothing that Russia and China can do in this instance. What they can do, and what every country is going to be saying, is that the United States cannot be trusted. That's exactly what every country, except from the vassals of the collective West. Okay, they're going to view this as a huge win, but Russia's going to take notice of this. China's going to take notice of this, and every country is going to take note of this. Iran is going to look at this. The strike against Iran hasn't ended the conflict in Iran. We're already talking about another strike in Iran, so that's also unfolding. We already have protests in Iran. We have the protests ramping up. There's already talk about another strike happening towards Iran. Netanyahu was in Mar-a-Lago just the other day, and he was selling Trump on a conflict round 2 against Iran. So that hasn't ended. My sense of Venezuela is that in the medium to long term, most likely you're going to get a lot of instability. That's not going to play in the favor of the United States. But in the short term, Trump is going to position this as a victory, and it is a victory. It was fast. It was quick. From what we're getting, no casualties. And we'll see what happens with Maduro.
That was my next question. What exactly?
I don't know. I don't know what he does with Maduro. I don't know. Does he parade him around? Do they put him on trial? I mean, this is. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't say what this means legally, international law, how they're going to view
I think we're past. I think we're past.
But I mean,
international
well, we're past. But I mean, there is. Well, look, the international rules-based order, right? Isn't that what the U.S. always lectures everybody about? International law and the rules-based order. Well, you just went into a country and you right? Isn't that what we've been told? You can't go decapitate.
These are the red lines. Even when Iran
these are the red lines. And
Israel was striking Iran.
Yeah. No matter how much you hate them, no matter how much you despise them, there are certain rules to war or to conflict, and there are certain international rules. You just can't go in there and grab the leader of another country. But we're dealing with the United States, and so there are no rules.
We're kind of seeing a new world order with the Monroe Doctrine being active again, having all these countries, a multipolar world where each country has their sphere of influence. China trying to increase her influence in the South China Sea, and obviously reuniting with Taiwan. We're seeing Russia and what we're seeing in Ukraine, and the US now is focusing more on Latin America. But no one would have expected that to include a military strike on Venezuela. What does that mean for Cuba and Colombia and the rest of the region?
Well, Cuba's next. I mean, Cuba's reliant on Venezuela for the oil. So Cuba's next. Is going to put the squeeze on Cuba, which is exactly what Rubio was aiming for. I mean, we got to remember that a lot of this is being pushed. My guess is being pushed by Rubio, and Rubio's ultimate goal may not be so much Venezuela, though he does have it in for Venezuela and for Maduro. But Rubio's ultimate goal is Cuba. So now Cuba's going to get squeezed once again. Russia has offered Cuba oil at a discount, but I believe Venezuela was getting the oil to Cuba free. So I mean, this is going to put Cuba in a very difficult position. I just want to comment on what you said about the international rules-based order and how everything is changing, spheres of influence. I think this is a lot more problematic than a lot of people are believing it is, because we're seeing oil tankers attacked. We're seeing oil tankers seized. We're seeing leaders kidnapped. We're seeing decapitation strikes on officials. We're seeing decapitation strikes on scientists. We're entering a very dangerous world right now. This is not good. This is not a good development. I understand the argument for Venezuela. They're going to have freedom and democracy now. I know how this is all going to be spun. Maybe they will. Maybe they will have freedom. Maybe they will have democracy. Maybe the oil industry is going to boom. I think you have to be pretty naive to believe that's going to happen, but it might. The real story here is that we are entering a world of no rules. of chaos, of big powers. If they want to, they can pretty much do as they wish. At least the United States is definitely doing as they wish. And so this is going to be very problematic. It's going to be problematic for trade,
And we've got
for the economy,
we
for
have
finance.
we have China upping the pressure on Taiwan as well. On a positive note, at least there's dialogue between the US and even Macron and Russia. At least we're close to the never to peace. I know we're still not close to it. And I think we both agree that last 10%, as Zelensky said, which is the territory and defense guarantees, especially when it comes to territory, we're far from reaching an agreement there, but we're in a very different position when it comes to that war than a year ago. And the war in Gaza, the strikes are ongoing, Lebanon strikes are ongoing, Syria is still not stable, but at least the war in Gaza officially is ended. So there's at least developments, positive developments on these two fronts, but at the same time, it comes at, increasing tensions in China and Taiwan, with I think the largest drills ever that just concluded a couple of days ago. And Japan saying they'll come to Taiwan's defense if China attacks Taiwan. And obviously we've got the decapitation strike now, the shock and awe attack on Venezuela and the capture of their leader and their kidnapping.
I mean, capture, they kidnap the guy. Yeah.
The defense minister just put out a statement, by the way. Would love to get your thoughts on it. We're talking about that power vacuum. So he has survived the attack and he's condemning the strikes. The Venezuelan people have been subjected to the most criminal military aggression by the government of the US. They have desecrated our sacred soil in Caracas and the state of Miranda and listed the places that were attacked. We issue the strongest denunciation before the international community for the flagrant violation of the United Nations Charter and international law that we're just talking about right now. Could we see someone within the military? Because if Maduro is no longer there, we're talking about Machado coming in power, which you said is not popular. But the military still has control of Venezuelan politics. Can't we just have a more hardline person within the military come into power, someone like the defense minister, which is speaking in support of Maduro and criticizing the US? Because Maduro's out, the military is still in control, which makes it, if that's the case, it puts the American situation, or Venezuela's situation, in a very precarious place. Because when there's a power vacuum, the military has control and the military is loyal to Maduro and Machado's not popular, it seems like a recipe for internal power struggles that could lead to a civil war.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know what the succession plan was for Maduro, for Venezuela. I don't know what they have in place. If Maduro is taken out, if he's gone, who do they have in place to replace him? How loyal are these people to the state? We don't know. We're going to find out, though. We're going to now find out, and we've got to see the people's reaction to all of this as well. What are the Venezuelans going to think? Are they going to rally behind the flag, or are they going to just accept what's going on?
Talking about the people rallying behind the flag, I know this is about Venezuela, but we are seeing developments since New Year's Eve across the world. We're seeing the protests in Iran as well. Netanyahu was on New Year's Eve with Trump, allegedly talking about a second strike on Iran. What do you expect to see there? Could that embolden U.S. intervention? They've had great success in Venezuela. Trump believes that he could do the same thing in Iran, and we could see a similar process, a similar plan implemented for Iran as well, especially with people on the streets and the regime under such pressure. We got reports that the banks were ordered by the regime to continue operations despite the similar to the 2008 crisis where liquidity is drying up in Iran. Could we see the same thing happen in Iran?
Regime change is definitely on the table in Iran, without a doubt. How they're going to do it, no one expected this outcome in Venezuela. So, I mean, the main message for the government in Iran is take notice of what's happened in Venezuela. Take notice at what happened in Novgorod towards Russia. Countries around the world need to see what's going on. And they need to realize that the world we live in today, there are no rules, especially when it comes to the great powers, especially when it comes to the way Trump in the United States is operating. Decapitation strikes are definitely on the table. Kidnapping military leaders is on the table. Covert operations, without a doubt, is the preferred policy of Trump.
Striking a peace delegation as well in Qatar. Don't forget that.
Yeah, striking a peace delegation, negotiating a peace deal, and then at the same time striking